For decades, Lucille Ball had the whole world cracking up, but near the end, the spotlight dimmed and all that noise vanished, leaving her sitting in silence with regrets that hit harder than any punchline ever could. And please hit the subscribe button. It costs you nothing, but it means a lot to me. When she arrived for what would become her final interview, she wasn't the firecracking redhead everybody remembered. She looked like someone carrying a whole lifetime on her back, heavy with heartbreak and the fear of being forgotten. What she revealed that day shook the room and millions watching at home, because this legendary queen of comedy finally dropped the mask and let people see the loneliness she'd been hiding for years. By 1989, her name still echoed in Hollywood, but her own life felt small and quiet as she drifted through days that no longer matched the glory she once owned. Her Beverly Hills mansion, once buzzing with jokes and famous friends, had turned into a cold, echoing place where memories were louder than visitors. Her kids, Lucy and Desi Jr., were grown and living far away, barely stopping by, and even though her husband Gary Morton stayed close, he could feel that heavy sadness in the house, the kind money and fame can't wipe away. Lucille had been America's sweetheart, the symbol of joy itself, but behind closed doors she battled old wounds that never healed. Ending her comeback show, Life with Lucy, in 1986 crushed her spirit, because she came out of retirement hoping to prove she still had the spark, only for the network to cancel it after 8 episodes, a blow she felt deep. People didn't laugh, critics tore it apart, and friends said she took every word to heart, staying up late rereading reviews and wondering if her magic had finally slipped away forever. To her, the failure wasn't just a show dying, it was a sign that time had moved on, and Hollywood wasn't waiting for its queen anymore. The comedians she once inspired were running the whole TV game now, but barely any of them ever reached out to check on her, leaving her alone in that big house with nothing but old reruns of I Love Lucy glowing in the dark. Sometimes she'd let out a tiny laugh, then swipe a tear like she hoped nobody would notice, even though she knew the room was empty. Her body was slowing down too, worn out from years of smoking, and by 1988 her heart started acting up in ways she couldn't ignore, even if she pretended everything was fine. She'd tell her nurse, "I'm fine," even when she could barely make it to the kitchen without holding on to the walls. When friends begged her to rest, she'd shoot back, "I don't know how to stop," because that stubborn fire that built her empire was now the only thing she still felt in control of. Those early heartbreaks shaped her, bruised her, and pushed her long before she ever stepped foot in Hollywood. Lucille Desiree Ball came into the world on August 6, 1911, in Jamestown, New York, a small-town kid who had no clue she'd one day own the industry. But her childhood was far from bright, and everything shifted when tragedy hit before she was even old enough to understand what was happening. At just 3 years old, she lost her father, Henry Ball, a hard-working telephone lineman who got sick with typhoid fever after climbing icy poles trying to fix tangled wires in a brutal storm. His health crashed quickly, and on February 28, 1915, he passed away at only 27, leaving a mark on her young mind she never managed to shake. She never forgot that day, her mother crying, a picture dropping off the wall, and a small bird flapping around inside the house like a warning she couldn't escape. That one moment stuck so deep that she carried a fear of birds her whole life, not just real ones, but drawings, patterns, anything that even looked like wings. Friends later said she wouldn't even stay in hotel rooms if the wallpaper had birds on it, because to her, that memory wasn't just superstition. It was the first sign that life could break you when you least expect it. It was a grief she could never escape, a shadow that followed her everywhere she went. Her mother was young, overwhelmed, and expecting Lucille's little brother Fred, so she sent Lucy to stay with relatives just to keep the family afloat. Lucy grew up feeling out of place, like she was just visiting her own life. When her mother remarried a man named Ed Peterson, things didn't get smoother. His parents were strict, cold, and even banned mirrors in the house so the kids wouldn't grow vain, which left Lucy learning early how to act like everything was cool, even when it wasn't. Those years forced her to master pretending long before she did it for cameras. Then came a tragedy that changed the whole family's world when Lucy was around 12. A backyard target practice setup went wrong, and a young neighbor boy was accidentally hit and left paralyzed, something no one involved ever forgot. The family was sued, lost the case, and lost everything they owned: house, furniture, even their insurance. Her grandfather, crushed by guilt, never worked again, and the whole family felt the weight of that single moment. Lucy would later say, "One accident destroyed us," and those words told the real story behind the woman who made the world laugh on I Love Lucy. By the time Lucille hit her late 20s, she already had more setbacks than wins, fighting through rejection like it was her second job. She chased her acting dream in New York, only to be told by teachers at the John Murray Anderson School for the Dramatic Arts that she had no talent, a blow that would have crushed anyone else, but she kept pushing anyway. One instructor even sent her home and told her mother straight up not to waste money on lessons, a hit to her confidence that burned for years. Later, Lucy would say that humiliation was the moment that hardened her spirit and pushed her to fight back harder than ever. "All I learned there," she once said, "was how to be frightened." But she still refused to walk away. She headed back to New York in 1928, grabbed modeling gigs just to stay afloat, and eventually packed up for Hollywood, where she hoped the cameras would finally give her a chance. By the 1930s, she'd earned a new nickname around studios, the Queen of the B-movies, showing up in over 75 films as the chorus girl, the funny friend, or the woman standing just outside the spotlight. Even then, she kept studying every frame, learning timing, posture, and how to control a scene like it belonged to her. Then everything flipped in 1940 during the filming of Too Many Girls, when she crossed paths with a young Cuban musician named Desi Arnaz, who walked in with confidence, charm, and a wild streak she couldn't ignore. They danced on breaks, fell hard for each other, and within months eloped in Connecticut like nothing could stop them. People said the marriage wouldn't survive, and in some ways they were right, because Desi partied heavy, stayed out late, and chased attention he didn't need. Lucy, who wanted stability more than anything, found herself swallowed by chaos again, but she loved him enough to believe their work could save their marriage. That belief sparked I Love Lucy in 1951, when CBS asked her to turn her radio show My Favorite Husband into a TV series, and she insisted Desi had to play her on-screen husband too. She demanded that Desi play her on-screen husband, but the network pushed back, claiming audiences wouldn't accept an interracial couple, something she refused to hear. To shut them down, she and Desi hit the road with a live vaudeville act, and the crowd reactions were so electric that CBS had no choice but to give them the green light. Once I Love Lucy hit the air, it didn't just succeed, it exploded, turning Monday nights into a national event. At its peak, 44 million people tuned in, more than the president could pull, all to watch Lucy and Ricky Ricardo bring chaos and charm to living rooms across America. Lucy's comedy came from this fearless place where she'd risk her dignity just to make people laugh, mixing perfect timing with a natural wildness the camera couldn't resist. But behind that big smile, her marriage was cracking apart little by little, and Desi's late nights and wandering attention kept hitting her heart like shots she tried to pretend didn't hurt. On screen, they were the dream couple. Off screen, she cried in silence, dealing with what she later described simply as booze and broads, a truth she wished she didn't know so well. She stayed because she wanted love to win, and for a while it did, Until I Love Lucy ended in 1957, and the cracks became impossible to hide. America adored Lucy and Ricky, but the real Lucille Ball was struggling to hold herself together while the world watched only the laughs. And then, right when her private life was shaky, another storm showed up, the Red Scare. In the early 1950s, fear ran the country, with Senator Joseph McCarthy and the Hollywood blacklist destroying careers with a whisper. In 1953, that fear crashed straight into Lucy's world after gossip columnist Walter Winchell suggested on air that a famous red-headed actress had once been a communist, and even without her name, everyone knew who he was aiming at. By the next morning, newspapers all over the country blasted headlines in red ink, and suddenly, America's comedy queen was staring down a scandal that could wipe out everything she'd built. In one day, Lucille Ball went from America's sweetheart to a national suspect, all because of a tiny decision she'd made almost 20 years earlier. Back in 1936, she registered to vote as a communist, not because she believed in it, but because her grandfather asked her to, and she wanted to keep the peace. She later said, "He wanted me to do it to please him." And that was the truth. She never went to meetings, never talked politics, and forgot the whole thing. But during the Cold War, even a forgotten signature could blow up your whole world, and suddenly her career was on the line. The timing was terrible because I Love Lucy was shooting a new season, and sponsors like Philip Morris were scared the public would turn on her overnight. Millions of dollars and the entire Desilu studios were at risk, and one rumor could have wiped everything out just like that. So Lucy handled it straight up. She met with investigators from the House Un-American Activities Committee and calmly told them the whole story. She said she signed only for her grandfather, never voted as a communist, and wasn't part of anything subversive. "I have never been a communist," she declared, standing her ground while the whole country waited to see if she'd fall. While America held its breath, Desi stepped in to protect his wife and their empire. Desi moved fast. He invited reporters to their home and even spoke straight to the audience before a live taping of I Love Lucy, stepping onto the stage like he was ready for a showdown. He told the crowd, "The only thing red about Lucy is her hair, and even that's not legitimate," and people burst out laughing before they even processed what he meant. Then he dropped the shocker. He said he'd spoken directly with FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, who confirmed Lucille Ball was completely cleared of suspicion. The crowd exploded into applause, and for a moment it felt like everything was safe again. But after I Love Lucy ended in 1957, life behind the scenes got rough. Lucille Ball became the most powerful woman in television, running Desilu Productions with Desi and overseeing future classics like Star Trek and Mission. Impossible, but the same success that kept them strong started tearing their marriage apart. Their arguments got louder, colder, and constant, and Lucy later said, "We weren't fighting for love anymore. We were fighting to survive." On March 3rd, 1960, one day after Desi's birthday and right after filming their last episode together, she filed for divorce, ending their 20-year marriage just 2 months later. Fans were stunned because to the world, they were still Lucy and Ricky, the couple who made everyone believe laughter could fix anything. But behind the scenes, Lucille had spent years dealing with betrayal, heavy drinking, and emotional burnout, and even Desi later admitted, "I caused it. My drinking, my temper, I ruined the best thing that ever happened to me." Even after the split, they stayed connected through business and old love, and Lucy bought his Desilu shares for $2.5 million, becoming the first woman to run a major Hollywood studio, a huge milestone that didn't bring the peace she hoped for. In 1961, she married comedian Gary Morton, a patient, steady man who was 13 years younger, hoping this time life would be different. They stayed together until her final day, but it was never the same fire she once had with Desi, a truth she admitted when she told a friend, Gary gave me stability, but Desi gave me fire. Even as life moved forward, she never fully let go of the man who changed everything for her. Her kids, Lucy and Desi Jr., grew up carrying the weight of a famous last name, each dealing with it in their own way. Lucy chased acting, while Desi Jr. struggled with addiction and the tabloids, especially when his early 1970s romance with actress Patty Duke turned into a media storm. When Duke became pregnant, rumors spread that Desi Jr. was the father, and the chaos tore Lucille apart. She saw it as a public embarrassment dragging her family through the mud, and even though a DNA test years later cleared him, the emotional damage had already hit hard. Lucy pulled deeper into her work, trying to control the family image while holding herself together. But heartbreak struck again when her best friend and longtime co-star Vivian Vance was diagnosed with cancer. Lucille stayed close until the very end, and when Vivian passed in 1979, Lucy was shattered, telling Carol Burnett, "Part of me died with her." Then came the moment she feared most. The phone call in November 1986 telling her that Desi Arnaz, the man who once shared her life, her work, and her history, was dying of lung cancer. Even after decades apart, she had never stopped caring, calling him, writing him, checking on him, and when his time was running out, she flew to Del Mar to see him one last time. Their daughter Lucy later said those final moments were full of laughter, tears, and quiet forgiveness. Two people closing a chapter that never really ended. On November 30th, their wedding anniversary, Lucy called Desi again, knowing time was slipping away. Their daughter held the phone to his ear and told her mother, "Say what you want to say." Giving her one last chance to speak from the heart, Lucy managed only the same 3 words that tied them together from the start: "I love you," repeating it like she hoped it could hold him here a little longer. Desi, weak but still aware, whispered back, "I love you too, honey. Good luck with your show." The kind of gentle goodbye that cut deeper because it was so full of love. 2 days later, on December 2nd, 1986, Desi Arnaz passed away at 69, and for Lucy, it felt like the last bright part of her world had disappeared. Just 5 days after losing him, she still showed up at the Kennedy Center Honors in Washington, D.C., even though she wanted to stay home. Her family urged her to attend, and midway through the ceremony, actor Robert Stack walked on stage, holding a letter Desi had written just days before he died, knowing she'd be honored that week. Stack read it aloud. "The New York Times asked me to divide the credit for I Love Lucy among the writers, the directors, and the cast. I told them, give Lucy 90% of the credit and divide the other 10% among the rest of us." The audience froze as he continued. "Lucy was the show. Viv, Fred, and I were just props. Damn good props. Props, nevertheless." Then came the final line. "P.S. I Love Lucy was never just a title." As the words echoed through the theater, the camera caught Lucy with trembling hands and tears streaming, while Gary Morton held her close and President Ronald Reagan and First Lady Nancy Reagan watched quietly. For the first time in public, Lucille Ball, America's Queen of Laughter, broke down, and the entire theater cried with her. It became one of the most emotional tributes Hollywood had ever seen, Desi's last love letter, sent across time, disguised as a farewell. A few years later, in 1989, Lucy gave her final TV interview. Her face looked thinner, her voice softer, but that sharp humor was still there. When asked what she wanted to be remembered for, she paused and said, "For making people happy," then added with a faint smile, "That's all I ever wanted." The room went silent, because everyone felt the truth in it. Months later, she suffered a heart attack, had surgery, and for a moment it seemed like she might pull through, but on April 26, 1989, her heart finally gave out at 77. Lucille Ball's life shows that even the brightest legends walk through shadows we never see, and her story still hits hard because her joy came from giving joy to others. Do you think the world ever gave her the love she truly deserved? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay locked in for more untold Hollywood stories. We've got plenty more coming your way.